But for today, we're going to be spending most of our time in EAM. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If I cut out at any point, definitely let me know. I will keep an eye on the meeting chat. If I don't answer your question right away, just bear with me. It's probably something that I'm going to plan to cover. But if not, I'll be sure to address all of the questions at the end of the session. In addition to that, I just want to mention that we can always learn from one another. I'm going to be presenting of how this system is intended to be used, or what I've learned while working on project implementations. But if you have something that you've learned along your EAM journey, feel free to include that and share that message in the meeting chat, just so we can all learn from one another as well. Perfect. Well, I will go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is setting up our meters. And the very first place that we want to start is units of measure. Units of measure can be accessed from materials, setup, units of measure. Now, units of measure are used throughout EAM. So they're used for parts, whether or not we keep a part in stock by each or feet or gallons. It's used in purchasing. Maybe we order something in packs or cases. We also use it for meters. So whereas we have UOMs for stock items that, like I said, might be each, it might be a pack, feet. You also need to be mindful that you have UOMs to accommodate your meters. So you may need to utilize units of measures such as, degree Fahrenheit, or maybe cubic meter per second. Perhaps it's, revolutions per minute, kilometers, okay, miles, meters, etc. So keep that in mind, that when you go to set up a meter in EAM, you're going to be tying it to a unit of measure. So you'll just want to make sure that those are set up in advance. And just a quick tip, there are a lot of UOMs that are included in base EAM. I just encourage you to kind of clean up the list and only make those UOMs that you are using in service. That way you're going to see kind of more consistency. It's going to be easier for end users to identify the correct UOM to utilize. So in our example today, we are actually going to be setting up a meter to record the number of hours that a new forklift is used. So we're going to be measuring the operating time on a new forklift. So the next step is to create a physical meter. Now this step, I'm going to say, is optional depending on the type of meter readings that you're going to be capturing. Okay, but first let's navigate to physical meters. From the equipment menu, this will be under setup and then down to meters. So the meter screen is where you set up what's referred to as physical meters. A physical meter is going to be a tangible device. So whether or not it's an odometer, maybe it's a flow meter, but it's a device that measures a particular usage of a piece of equipment. Some questions that I ask myself of whether or not I need a physical meter is, does the meter have a rollover point? Okay, an example would be an odometer. Okay, if there's a rollover or that maximum value. Additionally, I asked myself, can the meter be replaced? So maybe we have a RTD sensor where we're measuring the temperature, okay? Perhaps that needs to be replaced. So then while I can record the cumulative usage on that asset, I can always swap out the RTD sensor. So let's walk through creating a new physical meter. And in our example, I'm going to be creating a physical meter, and this is to record the operating time for a new forklift. So first you'll want to give the meter a unique identifier. Okay. So I am just going to keep things simple here. So I could enter in something that's going to give me a frame of reference for the equipment that it's used on. Or I could do something more of, maybe it's an analog meter, okay, for our forklift. Okay, whatever's going to make the most logical sense to your user in terms of the relationship between the meter and the piece of equipment. And you'll get an idea of that as we proceed, with the additional steps. Okay. So I will enter in a description. And then, like I said, my meter unit is going to be hours. And we have some additional fields here that are optional. The first is the maximum value. The maximum value serves two purposes. The first is, is there a maximum value on that measurement tool, such as a thermometer? If a thermometer kind of maxes out at, 180, you could put in the maximum value. It's also used as a rollover point. So if I have an analog hour meter with rolling digits, that can only track up to, let's say, 9,999 hours before rolling back to zero, then I would need to put in that rollover point as the maximum value. Okay. That way, the system will acknowledge if maybe a previous reading was 902, the next reading is 10, the system will recognize that it's met that rollover point, still keep track of the cumulative usage, but just acknowledge that that maximum value is in place. There's also a field here for last value. That would be the current reading on the meter. So if it is, maybe you're adding a meter, okay, into EAM, but it's existing. So there's, let's say an odometer, I'm buying a used car. I could go in and put essentially the current reading on the meter into that last value field. This field can only be populated upon creation of the physical meter. And then over here, you will see service point. That will populate once we make the association between the meter and the equipment record. Users will always have that reference point from the meter screen. I can also make or establish the relationship between the meter and the equipment from this screen as well. Once I save, you'll see that that field is no longer protected and I can make the association. But we're going to do that on the equipment screen. One thing that you will see is there is no out of service checkbox on the meter screen. There is an existing hexagon idea to add that capability into EAM. One that's called a workaround would be to set up an out of service class for the MET entity, and then you could always add a field lookup filter to the physical meter screen to filter out any of those meter readings that are no longer in service. And you can have multiple meters associated with a piece of equipment. The caveat to that is you can only have one meter of the same UOM. Let me say that better. I can't have 2 meters of the same UOM for the same piece of equipment. So if I'm adding multiple meters, they just have to have different UOMs associated with them. Essentially, if you attempt to add another meter with the same UOM, you'll get an error message that a meter with this UOM already exists. All right, so let's carry on here. What we're going to do now is talk about logical meters. So I'm going to head over to the asset screen. Okay, and we're gonna look at our forklift. Now, the first thing I will mention is the meter unit field that some of you have probably seen on record view. Okay, this is more of a reference field. Okay, and typically it's going to correspond with the primary meter usage for the asset. So the most relevant to the asset's primary function. Okay, this is not the same as setting up and recording the meter readings. This is more of a reference field, okay, that's available on record view, which can be useful with, say, setting up a data spy filter or searching by that meter unit on the various equipment screens in EAM. But our logical meters are set up on the meters tab of the equipment screens. So that includes assets, positions, systems, and even locations. And that logical meter is going to be the relationship between a unit of measure and an object, okay, or between a unit of measure and your equipment. And the intent is to track the cumulative usage, or it could just be readings, right? If you're just like recording, let's say, temperature or, flow, okay, of the piece of equipment throughout its operational life. Regarding the UOMs, once again, you cannot have, basically the system will not allow you to add another meter to a piece of equipment with the same UOM. So if you want to record, 2 different meters to track hours, you would need to have 2 OMs. One might be HR, one might be HUR. So let's proceed here. I'm going to put in my UOM. Once again, we're going to be tracking operating time for our forklift. And the next is the type of meter, okay? So we have 4 different types: standalone, parent, child, and then parent and child, okay? Let's just start with standalone, and then I'll show you an example of a parent-child relationship. So with standalone, essentially the equipment is not going to be receiving meter readings from any parents, nor is it going to be passing any meter readings to any of its child equipment, okay, of the same UOM. So this operating time is only for the forklift. Now we can enter the total usage. Okay, if maybe you're adding kind of existing meters into EAM, you can enter in the total usage to date. The system will automatically update, okay, the usage since the last work order. This is a new forklift, okay? So we're just going to leave it as is. So we're put total usage as 0. And then we have the readings for calculation, okay? Readings for calculation. So this is to specify the number of readings used to calculate the average daily usage. And the system will automatically run, okay, the calculation. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to put here, I'll do 6. So of the 6, most recent readings, okay, I'm gonna let the system calculate the average daily usage. And I'll come back to that and show you an example of that in just a few minutes. Now, I could just have a logical meter, okay? Remember some questions to ask yourself of whether or not you need a physical meter is it a meter that may be replaced or swapped out? Or perhaps it's a meter with a maximum value or a meter with a rollover point. Okay, those are good use cases for utilizing physical meters. Okay, so in this case, I can go ahead and associate my analog meter for my forklift. Now, this is a new piece of equipment. Okay, so I don't have any, total usage. I don't have a reading date. But one other thing to be aware of is this up-down meter checkbox. Okay, you will want to select this. Okay, if the meter readings, if new meter readings can be less than previous meter readings, such as temperature readings, okay? It might be 105, okay? But then it might drop down to 103, then it might jump up to 107 Fahrenheit. Could be the flow rate that fluctuates, okay? But for things that increase over time, have that cumulative usage, you'll just want to leave up-down meter unchecked. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'll go ahead and show you if I try to add another meter with the UOM of HUR, okay, you'll see that this is when you will get the error message. So it's tied to the UOM. So if I wanted to set up another meter, okay, to track hours, I would need to have a separate UOM set up to do so. Now, before I proceed, I just want to expand on a couple of things. The first is the type of meter, okay? This is a standalone, but let's look at an example of more of a parent-child relationship. So I'm gonna head over here to my system screen. And this is a very, simple, straightforward example just to illustrate the parent-child relationship as it relates to meters. Okay. So in this scenario, vehicle 03 is a parent. So if I hop over to the meters tab, you'll see that the type of meter is parent. Okay, great. What that means is that when a meter reading is recorded for vehicle 03, it's going to pass that down to any child equipment of the same UOM. So in this case, it would be mileage. Okay. Now, engine 10, this is a child. Okay. So basically, since this meter is set up as a child, they're able, or that meter, okay, is able to receive meter readings from the parent. Okay. So if vehicle 03, if we record a meter reading for 2,000 miles, that will pass or roll down to engine 10. Next, we have the transmission, okay? That is actually set up as a parent and a child. So we want it to receive from its parent, which is the vehicle, and roll that reading down to its child, which is the transmission. And then the transmission is a child, okay? So we have parent, child, parent and child, and then child. Now there is one organization option that impacts this functionality. So you'll want to make note of this if you set up parent-child meters. And I will put this in the meeting chat. And I'll go ahead and show it to you here on my screen. Okay. In this environment, okay, we're going to roll that meter reading down to all children. But if that org option is set to DC, it will only read down to one level. Okay, and I did test this. Okay, and essentially when I changed it to DC, okay, and I recorded a reading on vehicle 3, it only rolled down to engine and transmission. But if the value is AC, as it is currently, it will roll down to engine 10, transmission 3, okay, and then the vehicle transmission here. Okay. So I'll just show that to you very quickly here. We haven't even really gotten into how to record meter readings, and I will show you every way to do so, but let me just do a quick one. Okay, here on the meters tab. And I'll just go ahead and put in 2000. And if I go, we'll just jump straight to my child asset here. We will see that that meter reading passed down. Okay. Now we have basically, and I'll explain this to you, but on the previous one, okay, the previous reading on my vehicle 03 was 1114, okay? At that point in time when I recorded it, that org option wasn't rolling down to this child. And basically what's flowing down is the difference or the usage, okay? If I had that 1114 roll all the way down to my lowest child, okay, then the reading would be 2000 as well, okay? But since we have that one off, I'll just show you that here. okay, this is one that wasn't rolled all the way down to the child, okay, but it's still passing, okay, the usage down to the child. Okay. So I just encourage you, if you are going to implement parent-child, okay, meters, definitely just take a look at that org option and determine, which setting is going to work best for you. And then make sure that for each of the parent-child equipment in the hierarchy that you have the type of meter designated to reflect that. Okay, so if I head back to our forklift, I just want to revisit one other thing that I mentioned. I mentioned the readings for calculation, okay? So if you want the system to calculate the average daily usage, you need to tell the system, okay, the number of readings to use to calculate that usage. So I can show you here we have another asset that does have historical readings, okay? And what I did, so I'm just going to come to Actions, View, Meter History. Okay? And essentially what I did is I just exported the meter history to Excel. Okay? And you'll see that right now the readings for calculation is set to 3. Okay? Well, how is EAM calculating 133 as the average daily usage? Okay. Well, let's just walk through it together so you know, okay, how it is calculating the average daily usage. So I had the readings for calculation set for 3. And essentially what it is doing is it's taking you can kind of see here, it's looking at three most recent readings. It's going to take the most recent, so, and then it's going to take the one, the third one back. So in this case, our total usage for the past 3 readings is 56,875 minus 25,001. Okay, so that gets us to the 31,874. And then what the system is doing is it's calculating the number of days. In my example, I'm not kind of getting down into the weeds, date and time. I just did basically the date, okay? So basically I'm letting the system, I'm looking here in my Excel spreadsheet of how many days are between May 7th, 2025 and September 10th, 2024, okay? And then basically you're just going to take the total usage, okay, divide that by the total days, and as you can see here, we're getting to the 133. And I'll switch this here just to show you. If I switch this to 2, okay, the system will recalculate. And in this example, I'm just looking at the most recent 2 readings to get the total usage, the days, and then the average daily usage. Okay. It's just good to know how the system is getting to the average daily usage, and it's going to help you to determine, okay, hopefully, how many readings, okay, you need to incorporate to have a good set of data. And a lot of that's going to be determined on how frequently you're recording the meter readings. this was like a hodgepodge of meter readings. But if you are routinely, okay, maybe it's the first of the month, okay, then maybe you want to look at it, for the past year. So you would want to do the past 12, okay, or maybe it only makes sense to look at it on a weekly basis because maybe it's like the flow rate or something else that you're calculating. And that's where you have to keep in mind, okay, with meters, it's not always usage, okay? Sometimes it's more of a metric, such as, the temperature, okay? Average temperature over a period of time. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gave you an idea of how the system is calculating the average daily usage. So if I return to my forklift, okay, and you probably are already caught a glimpse of some of this, but this is where you're setting up the logical meter, is on the meters tab. So from here, okay, from the actions drop down, you can also enter meter readings. Okay, and you're going to have two options available. The entry type can be a reading. It could also be the difference. For reading, you're going to be putting in the value of the meter, okay, at that point in time. The difference would be if you wanted to provide the difference between the last reading and the current reading, okay? So if I wanted to just record the usage rather than the current reading, I would use difference. Otherwise, in this case, I'm just going to look at that analog meter and go ahead and put in 2. Now, if you wanted to attach this to a work order, you can, and I'll also show you how you can record it directly from the work order. Okay. And just keep in mind that the date and time, so the date entered must occur between the date of the last meter reading and the current date. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And you may have noticed, I'm just going to switch to my vehicle 02, okay, where I have more meter history essentially. You can, for non-up-down meters, okay, you can delete the last reading. So if I try to delete this one here, okay, from September, okay, you're going to receive a message that only the last reading can be deleted, okay? So I can delete the one from today. Now, if this was an up-down meter, then I could delete essentially any of the meter readings, okay? I wouldn't be restricted to just the first one. Okay, so here I could always go in and I could delete this reading. Okay. And then I will mention, if for some reason you need to, you can't like go all the way back and delete something, you could just record a new meter reading. If you happen to you entered a higher value than you intended to, okay, try to delete, okay. Otherwise, you can enter a negative difference, okay. So I'll show you that if I put in -1 as the difference and then submit. And as you can see here, okay, it basically adjusted my reading. It deducted it back down by 1. Okay, so we have the meters tab is one option where you could go to actions, enter meter reading, okay, and you'll see the option there to view meter history as well. But then there's the meter readings tab. This is another place on the equipment record where you can enter in a meter reading. Okay, so here, if I wanted to say, go ahead and let's say bump it to 3, okay, I could definitely do so and go ahead and save that. And the great thing here is on the grid, you're going to see all of the meter readings. And a tip is to, if you are going to utilize parent-child meters, I encourage you to add the child reading field to the Data Spy layout, okay? That way, you will know whether or not that reading came from a parent record, okay? If I go in and I just add a reading to this record directly, you'll see that it is not a child reading because I added it directly to the child rather than it coming from the parent record. Because sometimes it's be like, well, where did this reading come from, right? And it just provides some context, as well as it will list if it was tied to a work order. Speaking of work orders, we can also record meter readings on a work order. Okay, so let's look at a work order here. And we will go to, I went too far. I think I already have it open. So we'll go to the meter readings tab. Okay. Probably looks very similar to what we are seeing on the equipment screen. Okay. But, okay, this will allow us to record a meter reading. Maybe we're performing maintenance, on this transmission. While we're doing so, perhaps we want to go ahead and record a meter reading. Okay. Now, the cool thing is that the target equipment will automatically populate with the top level equipment in that meter structure, okay? Whereas the equipment is the equipment defined on the work order, okay? If it's standalone, okay, then, the values are gonna be the same. And if I only want to record this, okay, on my transmission 008, that's fine. You can just update the target equipment, okay? But the system knows, so it's kind of doing that for you. So if I go ahead and put in a new value and record this, even though my work order is for my transmission 08, if I go back to my vehicle 03, okay, you'll see, okay, that it recorded that target equipment meter reading. So it would be passed through my hierarchy, which I think is great. And then another place on the work order where you can record meter readings is part of a checklist. Okay. So here for my forklift, okay, I could have a checklist item, okay, assuming that the UOM on the meter matches the UOM on the checklist item. So here we have hours. Okay. Then I could go ahead and record the meter reading. We have two additional ways to record meter readings. Another option is on the batch meter reading screen. This screen is available under Equipment, Process, and then Batch Meter Readings. This is more of a data entry screen, okay, where you can just like type in and tab across to enter in the meter readings. If you're unsure, you can activate the field lookup, and you can do so by using function F9. And so here, if I wanted to, I could go ahead, okay, go to my forklift. I could enter in the new value and then update the meter. Okay. I've also seen this used, if they're, let's say you're recording temperature or flow rate, and you're doing it for the last, shift, and there may have been a couple of different readings. You can always come out here and copy the line and then just enter in the values, and obviously you can update the date time accordingly. And just remember that you might have to do control function F9, okay? But on mine, it's function F9 to activate the field lookup. And then you can just do update meters. Okay, and I think I probably got between prior. Yep, I figured as much. So I'll just enter a new one here. We'll go ahead and just do this. I'm not sure if my system time's going to work, but we'll try it here. If not, I'll just show you with another piece of equipment. Yeah, I figured as much. Let me grab another one for you here. Let's go ahead and do our truck. And we'll go ahead and record. And this one's been around for a while. Okay, so one record was processed. Okay. Regarding the meter showing on the meter reading from the checklist, so if I go back to that work order, it was for my forklift. I did it for the 5 hours. So if we check out that forklift here, okay, there's our 5 hours. And then there's also a work order checklist. Let's see, I might have it already out here. There it is. Where you can view the checklist items. And all I did was just double click on that checklist to view the checklist items. And it's my understanding that when it comes to, quantitative or values or meter readings, that the system's going to be looking for a numeric value to associate with the UOM. Okay, so we can record meter readings on the meters tab from the actions dropdown, the meter readings tab, okay, on the work order, okay, the meter readings tab, the checklist, on the batch meter reading screen. You can also create import utility templates and import meter readings. Always recommend testing that in a test or training environment, but the template can be created from the meter readings tab and just right click to create the import utility template. Okay, let's talk about, I want to be mindful of our time, so let's talk about meter-based PMs real quick here. So I am going to go ahead and add my new forklift, okay, to a PM, okay, based on the documentation, the manual for that forklift, okay. We should do preventive maintenance based on 250 hours of usage. Okay. So what I'm going to do, okay, is associate this forklift with this forklift preventive maintenance PM. And I'll just give you a glimpse here of that PM schedule. You'll see I have it set to variable because I want the next one, okay, to be based on when the previous PM was completed, okay? Or I could switch it to fixed, and it's going to be based on when the last PM was originally due, okay? It's not recommended that you use duplicate with meter-based PMs. And you'll see here that the meter interval is 250 hours. Okay, so I'm going to set that here. And since this is a new forklift, then I could go ahead and put that the meter due for this forklift is at that 250 hour mark. Now with meter-based PMs, those preventive maintenance, they are created automatically, when that meter reading is recorded to trigger the preventive maintenance work order. Okay. So if I were to come out here and record a meter reading, and I'm just going to do, let's say, 251 hours and click save, you'll see that the following work order was created. Okay, that's because it was the first meter reading that exceeded when that meter was due. Okay. So if I take a look out here, okay, the system automatically created, okay, this work order. There are a couple of organization options that impact this field here, the last meter reading. You may want to make this field available via Screen Designer. When the work order is created, it's going to populate with the last meter reading. But there are two org options, okay, and I'll put those in the meeting chat as well, so you have them handy. Okay, so let me just copy them in real quick. And basically, these control whether or not that field updates. Okay, so I'll explain it here. Okay. So I have this field, it's going to populate when the work order is created, and I do not have it set to update. But you can update those org options to update essentially the last meter reading field when that work order is closed, okay, or it's switched to that system C status, okay. I have it off in this environment, but just something that you may want to consider of whether or not you want it to update when that work order is closed. And then another thing to let you know about is the ability to, if you want to replace a physical meter. So if I go back to our assets here and I go to valve 01, let's say I need to replace this meter, okay? So one thing that you would want to do is set up a new physical meter, okay? So I have a meter here. Okay, I currently am utilizing that out of service class to filter out, okay, the meter because it's not in use. Okay, so I could go ahead and clear that out. Okay, I could remove this physical meter, okay, and save, and then I could go ahead and select our flow meter 2. So you don't have to delete the logical meter, okay? Remember, your logical meter is recording the cumulative usage or the meter readings for a piece of equipment over its operational lifetime, okay? So now I've just replaced it, and you'll see that flow meter 01, okay, is no longer attached. So I could go ahead and update the class. Okay, if you wanted to. This was just if you wanted a way to filter it out. Okay, and you'll see now that flow meter 2 is attached to valve 01. All right, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and I hope to see you again at a future DTI Academy session. Take care.